What's up guys, Zero Reigns here, and today I wanted to discuss a topic that many might disagree with me on, which is perfectly okay. These are just a collection of my personal thoughts from playing when the binding coil was released to its conclusion with turn 13. I should note, obvious spoilers to anyone who hasn't completed the fight. This video won't be going over the story of Bahamut, but rather the fight itself, and why I feel it was the biggest disappointment of the binding coil. Not to say the fight wasn't fun or challenging, but rather half-baked, and not fully fleshed out. By the end of this video, I would love to hear your thoughts, but please reserve your ideas until then. This video isn't to bash or degrade the raid, but rather help improve our core concepts of the fight for future raids. Let's get started. The very first time we step foot into the final coil of Bahamut, turn 13, is that of uncertainty. We look around at a plain, dark, and blue sky, with a dim light above that seems to be our only sense of comfort in this den of dark. We look around and notice a world of emptiness. Upon our ground lies a sketched pattern of the Tree of Life, circling like a clock. We then hear a mighty roar as Bahamut descends from the sky, wings closed. At this point, my excitement had me falling out of my chair. Bahamut expands his wings, roars, and signals our destruction is imminent. Everything in his presence shows that this fight will not be easily conquered. From this alone, Bahamut Prime seems to be the epitome of all bosses thus far. It's just everything past this point is where I begin to feel a bit of disconnect and confusion. The best way I can describe this fight would be to, ironically, compare it to WoW's Cataclysm conclusion with Deathwing. Both had amazing build-ups and core ideas, but in the end fell flat in terms of mechanics. That's my biggest gripe with the encounter itself, was that it had so much potential with its core ideas. Bahamut strikes the earth and shakes it to its very foundation, ripping it apart, leaving parts of the ground dangerous to walk upon. His massive size flattens you, putting his entire weight into a single attack, followed by his flare breaths, which incinerate the ground. He uses his classic Mega Flare, forcing you to split its damage, unable to take it alone. His Giga Flare signals the transition, followed by a massive AoE attack. He calls upon everything he has left to throw at you, his pain, his blood, his sins. Even these aren't enough to thwart your determination. Desperate, he unleashes his ultimate attack, Terra Flare, which incinerates the very air itself. Pillars of flame spew out and engulf you in its blinding light, yet you press on. His rage at its peak, he musters his remaining energy to attack with a Circle of Death, Akmorn, blasting you with the very fury of a Terra Flare. His wings create tornadoes that throw you around the room. At last, through all these perils, you prevail, striking Bahamut Prime down, ending his rage once and for all. Described like this, Bahamut would appear to be the single greatest encounter in all of 14 combined. But then I remember an older turn, one that had a square off against the White Raven himself. Herself. Itself? Memory of... I don't know, whatever. Turn 9, in my opinion, is the true epitome of coil, because it does almost everything better than what Bahamut Prime tried to do. Starting off, looking at Bahamut Prime's fight as a whole. The fight plays out very similar to Nail, where the starting phases start off simplistic, adding on to its complexity later on in the fight. Looking closer at Bahamut's starting phase, we see his first ability starts off with Flatten. Nothing in particular stands out from this skill. He stomps you with his foot, followed by, in my opinion, a very beautiful animation of flare breaths, one of the better parts of this fight. He then follows this up shortly with one of his most disappointing mechanics, Earthshakers. Instead of a colossal of an attack like the name implies, well, we're left with no animation of a cracking earth, no jets of magma, just a little puddle of earth, which makes us go ouch if we stand in it. This mechanic is also prevalent for the entire fight, being a major mechanic. Based off aesthetics alone, it's not very impressive. Mechanically wise, it's even worse. It provides a huge amount of tick damage if you're unable to get out of the puddle of goop in time, while slowing your movement speed. It's meant to be similar to Titan, where it constricts your movement of the arena, forcing you to place puddles with foresight. This in itself isn't a bad thing, but for the King of Worms to have goop be one of his signature attacks is a bit disappointing. Not to mention many a DPS still complain the tick timing is inconsistent. Personally, I haven't had any issues with this, but I know plenty have. We then begin with Mega Flare, which again, in all fairness, looks fine. The AoE animation is nice, and the stacking together flows well into the lore of the attack itself. These mechanics remain until Phase 2, where Earthshaker is temporarily removed until Phase 4. It compares evenly with Nail, having Ravenspeak in place of Flatten, and dropping meteors in the arena constriction instead of puddles. As for Phase 2, it summons 3 adds Maricidia, while you have to deal with Flare Star, a small orb that stacks the more damage every time you get hit by one. This phase is often the one phase that I hate the most. It's a very repetitious phase. To be fair, pretty much all fights have a degree of repetition, but because of the way the mechanics are drawn out and the sheer amount of HP needed to shove Bahamut out of this phase, makes it more of an annoyance than a tight DPS check. The mechanics are fairly straightforward to deal with. Kill the add, pick up orbs, heal for rage. Kill the add, pick up orbs, heal for rage. Kill the add, pick up orbs, hope you don't get another rage, lol bad DPS. What makes this stage frustrating is just the sheer amount of time you spend in it trying to get to the next part of the fight. It's also quite easy to wipe in this phase, meaning you'll spend the next 4 minutes getting back into this phase to deal with it all over again. Personally, having a double add phase in turn 13 really didn't help to serve its purpose. It feels like a dumbed down add phase, with small orbs being an actual attack. I suppose with how big a scale Bahamut is, you would expect a slightly more engaged attack. To me, this entire phase felt unnecessary. The adds hate also tends to be a bit tedious, as even the most veteran of tanks will have those adds ping pong with their healers from time to time. Looking at T9, Phase 2 almost feels the same way, but with more of a group dynamic. The group needs to come together for where to bring the adds, while managing DPS and picking up meteors. All of this while meteors fall from the sky. In terms of visuals, I give T9 the upper hand here, giant golems for the win. Also, in terms of mechanics, T9 seems to make the group come together more than what Bahamut's Phase 2 does. Phase 3 is where I'm a bit torn. In terms of visuals, I love Bahamut's Phase 3. The nostalgia of not only being able to see Twin again, but that oh so sweet green blimp of dive bombs brings the fight on a personal level. The adds are well executed in this phase, as they all have a unique purpose. Blood will swap between different types of immunities to attacks, the pain will be a high damage, high HP, high cause of your tank dying add. Sin is a mini DPS check outside of the already big DPS check to clear the adds, and Twin brings back the nostalgic death sentence. As a player, it shows how far you've progressed. What was once an entire encounter, now is only one of the adds as your group slays the other dragons in between destroying Twin. As a side note, I know it's not technically Twintania, rather the Storm of Maricidia, but the idea of growth is here. Not to mention Terra Flare, an absolutely beautiful attack which really makes you drop in awe as its blinding light succumbs your character. As far as mechanics goes, it's quite entertaining. The adds die roughly quick, the constant repositioning keeps you on your feet, dive bombs are well executed, and seeing Bahamut dive right next to you will make you soil your pants every time. This fight also begins to somewhat show Bahamut has a personality. His rage, his sins, his pain, he's throwing it all at you. Outside of him never saying a word, you really feel his wrath and anger. Turn 9, by comparison, is on that same level. Its Phase 3 begins with an arena change that leaves you awe-inspired, tearing your heart in two as you stand on the fields of Cartano, where Bahamut first erupted. For any 1.0 players, this was a significant moment, and witnessing it drives you all the much more harder to slay Nail and end the cycle of Astral to Umbral. Going into Phase 4, this is where, mechanically, I was disappointed. The climax of the fight visually looks amazing, with Akmorns blasting, tornadoes making the arena look like a windy, destructive ground. Just the entire process of this last phase is again tedious and repetitious to Phase 1 and 2. The length of this phase was fine for me, but reusing the same mechanics 3 times over makes the feeling you have a little bit robbed. It may sound hypocritical, but Turn 9's last phase is a perfect ending to a great fight. Nail will throw every last ability you have faced thus far onto you, but with greater emphasis on execution. Supernovas, ethereal beams, dive bombs, Bahamut's Claw, upgraded from Ravens, similar to how Flatten becomes Akmorn. Nail reuses a lot of her same mechanics, but in a way where you felt you learned from the previous phases to help you push through the harder versions of them in the last phase, while adding new party mechanics like the fire, ice, lightning, making your party cooperation at its peak. Bahamut, on the other hand, only adds a few more mechanics to his repeating chain. Earthshakers now last a little bit longer, with Green Tether, and Gigaflare is rotated every 2 Akmorns. To me, nothing in this last phase outside of Akmorn really inspired me that much. The arena, which is stained a shade of red outside of the blue from the first phase, also dampers my excitement. Seeing the Battle of Cartano Flats and Dalamoon in the sky was much more exciting than a damp red sky. I also would have preferred Terra Flare animation stayed for the rest of the fight, but I can understand that may have been a little distracting. So with all of that said and done, do I find Bahamut to be a horrible fight? If it were any other fight, I would have loved it dearly, but seeing as it is Bahamut, by the end I was feeling robbed of an experience that I felt rushed to make a deadline release. Like a great movie that hits a high point and then just kinda stays within its safe zones for the remaining hour. I understand that time and money were the biggest things against the designers, and for the time they had, the fight came out pretty well. But like Deathwing before Bahamut, they both shared a similar fate. Mechanics that sounded cool, and visuals that matched, but mechanically fell short of its ideas. My hope is for the future that Final Encounters are given the same love and treatment Turn 9 was given. I want to leave a Final Encounter wishing I could just re-queue over and over again. I love this game, and I believe it can continue to push itself to greater heights. Turn 13, for me, was sadly just not what I was expecting. That about wraps it up for me. Please let me know your thoughts in the description below, and as always, if you enjoyed this video, please give it a like. And as always, happy raiding!